Dear GAGEpack users, welcome to another video on GAGEpack learning series. In this video, we are going to see how to add a new email address, how to create a new email group, how to assign an email address to a particular gauge, and how to replace an existing email address with a new email address. Some of these queries are very commonly raised queries from GAGEpack users. They want to know how to add an email address, how to create a group. Sometimes if some users move to a different role and someone else has taken over, how to get their email address assigned to the gauges or changed from the old person to new person. So these are some of the common queries that we receive from GagePack users. So we thought a video on this will help the users to handle this by themselves. If you're not clear or you want some support, you can always reach out to our tech support number and our tech support email address, which will be shared in the description of this particular video. But this video will try to solve many of your queries related to the four topics that I discussed. Create a new email address, create a new email group, add the email address to a gauge, replace the existing email address with a new email address. Now let's get into the video and understand how to do this. So this is the landing page of GagePack. So you will see these icons or tabs in your GagePack screen. So we need to click on File. And once we click on File, we get these options. Here I will click on Settings. And as I click on Settings, you get this GagePack settings window. And if you log in as a GagePack supervisor, you get all these four options. If you didn't log in as a supervisor and log in with another user ID, not a supervisor ID, then this fourth tab, supervisory tab, will be missing. So you'll get only these three options. Now, for us to add an email address or to create a group, we don't need this supervisory tab. We need to get into global collections. So once I click into global collections, I have many options, and one of the options will say email address. So when I click on email address in this screen, I can add a new contact. So what is adding a new contact? So let me click on this. So I'm going to give the name as Vinod Kumar, and I'm going to give email address as vinodrrk at gmail.com. So this is email address of one of the users. So similarly, you can give the name of the user and the email address here, and you can click OK. So when you do that, what happens? A new name, that is a new contact with an email address get created. Now let's say I want to create one more. So what I do, I click on new contact and I call this as Vinod Kumar Rajendra. Okay, just to avoid confusion, let's call this Nanda. And let's say the email address is Nanda @ gmail.com. So what I've done, I have created two new contacts. One is Nanda, another one is Vinod. So this is how you create a contact. So this is about creating the contact. Very simple. And once you do this, the next question is for a particular gauge in morning shift, Vinod is the supervisor. So he's in charge of the gauge. And in the evening shift, Nanda is the supervisor. If the gauge is past due calibration or failed calibration, or if a friendly alert email has to be sent, it should be sent to both of them. So I cannot assign one person's name, but I need to assign two persons' name to a particular gauge. So what should I do? So this is where you have to create a group. So instead of creating a new contact, now we are going to click on new group. So let me call this new group. So as soon as you click on new group, this particular window will get highlighted. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to drag Vinod contact and drop it here. Similarly, I'm going to drag Nanda's contact and drop it here. And then I'm going to save this group. So when I click on save group, it will ask on what name you want to save this. So I'm going to call this as PQ SI line 1 supervisors. So PQSI line 1 supervisors. So this is the name of the group. So I click on this. So a new group get created. So we saw how to create a new email address. We also saw how to create a new group. The first two questions have been taken care. Now I'm going to save and exit. So after doing this, I'm going to save and exit. So now if I click on add a new gauge, so let's call this as test gauge 001, right? So then I can give the gauge type. So let's say I'm calling this as a caliper, gauge description. I'm calling this as a digital caliper. And then I can fill all the other details. So in the interest of time, I'm not doing it. Maybe I'm filling some of this information, skipping some of this information, right? So after I do all this, I'll be able to select the email address. So this is where I can select the email address. So I have a choice of selecting Nanda, I have a choice of selecting Vinod, or I have a choice of selecting PQSI line 1 supervisors. So when I say PQSI line 1 supervisors, for this gauge, I'm not assigning a particular person's email address. Instead, I am assigning a group. And who are the two or more than two people also can be part of the group. But in this case, who are the two people part of the group? Vinod and Nanda. These two people are the part of the group. So what I've done, I have assigned this gauge and I have saved this gauge. So what happened? So let me close this. After closing this, so test 001, there is test gauge 001. If you come and see, you'll have PQSI line 1 supervisor. So what I have done, I have created a contact by the name Vinod and assigned an email address. I've created a contact by the name Nanda and assigned an email address. Then I've combined these two contacts and created a group. Now I have assigned that group to PQSI line 1 supervisor. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to show the fourth option, that is replacing one of the existing email addresses. So let's say in this database, I have 68 gauges. Some of the gauges, Kevin is the person in charge. So his email address is there. For some, it is Bobby, right? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to now create a filter. So here I'm going to click on filter. So this is the option, the funnel kind of a symbol that you see here. That is where we create new filters. So I'm going to create a filter. So, and I'm going to name this filter as test filter. Okay. What I want to do by creating this filter, I'm going to identify those gauges. So I'm going to select the option email to, and I'm going to say equal to, and I say those emails or those gauges where Benjamin's name has been identified as email to. So I'm going to say okay. So now the test filter is created. I'm going to apply this test filter. When I apply this test filter out of 67 gauges that you saw in the beginning, now we have 28 gauges where Benjamin name is given as email to, right? So for your understanding, let me remove this filter. So if you see, totally we have 68 gauges. If I apply this filter from that 68 gauges, we are able to identify 28 gauges for which Benjamin is the email to person. So his email address is mapped to these gauges. Now Benjamin is moved to a different role, and let's say Vinod has taken over his role. So what I need to do now, I need to replace Benjamin's email address from these 28 gauges. I'm going to replace Benjamin's email address with Vinod's email address. So what I need to do, I need to click on utilities. So there is an option called search and replace. People who are familiar with Control F, which is search, and then you can replace a particular name or a word or an alphabet. In Microsoft Excel, we do that. So just to make you understand or familiarize with this. So here is the raw data in an Excel file. So what I can do, I can say Control F, I can say replace. So I can say find yes and replace with correct. So what I'm going to do for this selected region, a selected number of cells. I'm going to find the alphabet or letter yes, right? Not letter, word yes. I'm going to replace this with the word correct. So what I will do now, I will say replace all. And it will say you have totally replaced 34 replacements. This is how the find and replace option in Excel work. So very similar to that, we have a find and replace option in our GAGEpack as well. So we need to first identify the number of gauges for which this replacement need to be done. So I have used a filter to get those 28 gauges listed here. Now in utilities, I have an option called search and replace. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to search and replace one of the gauge fields. So what do we call it as gauge field? Gauge field is nothing but what are the information that you have here? We call it gauge field. So I'm going to click on utilities, search and replace. And I'm going to click on gauge field. So in gauge field, what I'm going to do, I'm going to replace the field called email to. So I'm going to select the field which need to be replaced. So in the email to column for these 28 gauges, whatever is the current name, replace it with Vinod. So that's the instruction I'm going to give to GAGEpack. So find this column and replace whatever information you have there, replace it with Vinod. I'm going to say make changes. So GAGEpack is prompting that you're going to make changes for 28 gauges. Do you want to do it? I say yes. Now GAGEpack is asking, why do you want to do this? Role change. Then I'm going to say okay. So in this sample, gauges 130.gb1 was saved in the backup folder, search and replace. So it has made the necessary changes. So when I say okay, now in this filter, you will not even find a single gauge. Why? Because for all those gauges, the email to column got changed. So that is why in this filter, you don't find any gauges, right? Okay. So let's see whether those changes got effective. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the filter and I'm going to edit that filter. Instead of Benjamin, I'm going to put Vinod Kumar. Okay. Apply. You will find all those 28 and you will find the name as Vinod. So friends, let me quickly summarize again. So what we have identified or what we have understood in this video is how to create a new email address, how to add more than two or more than two email address to create a group, how to assign that email address or that group to a particular gauge, and how to replace an existing email address or group with a new email address or group for a selected number of gauges using the filter option. So these are the things that we have seen in this video. I hope this video will be useful for you. Some of the queries that we received in the recent days are about adding new email address, creating groups, replacing email address. So from that perspective, we decided to create this video. You can try this. If you have any queries regarding creating email address, you can look at this video and try to create or add email address yourself. If in case still you have any questions, any challenges, feel free to call us in our tech support number or write to our tech support email address. Our tech support number and email address will be given in the description of this video. Thank you.